Thrive Guys, Episode 9, Our Journey with Apps. As you know, I've been on the journey, on a quest for the perfect night's sleep. And last week I told you about my new mattress that I invested an eye-watering amount of money on. And that rabbit hole has moved somewhat, and I am further down it than I thought I would be. And I've moved on to purchasing ridiculous thread count duvets and sheets. So
right, can you tell me anything about thread count? Is the higher the better?
Higher the better.
Or are you just
absolutely the higher the better. Yeah. So most sheets that you pick up from a supermarket are like 180 thread count, which, to be honest, is fine, right? You know, the majority of people sleep on that kind of thread count sheet, and it's absolutely fine. Until you go to a hotel where they might have 300 or 400 thread count sheets and duvets and stuff, and you're like, oh, that's nice. And I like that kind of hotel feeling, but I want the hotel feeling in my own bed where it feels kind of comfortable and stuff. So I've invested in a 400 thread count sort of base sheet and a 600 thread count duvet and pillow set. And it's hard to describe how soft and almost like silk it is.
I can't believe this works, because I figured the whole reason you have like a really good night's sleep in a hotel is because you're normally on holiday. So you have no stress, you just pass out, or you're incredibly drunk because you've been out enjoying the nightlife. Probably
more column B than column A. Let's be honest with ourselves. And honestly, I'm not like you in that regard. I don't have good night's sleeps in hotels. I'm comfortable, but part of my, I don't know, it's something that's like hardwired, but because it's unfamiliar territory, I'm always kind of on the alert for predators and whatnot. So
let me tell you what's good about a hotel though, is the aircon. Most hotels I stay in have aircon, and I whack it on all night.
Yeah.
And just the cold air blowing on me just makes me sleep like a baby. So
you should have your bedroom cooler than the rest of your house anyway. It should be as cold as you can get it, because you will just sleep better. So yeah, I'm going to continue on this journey, I imagine. But yes.
So is this night one as well?
Night one.
So that's good result. 100% success.
100% success. And my advice to everybody out there is, if you can afford to invest in some nicer sheets, some higher thread count sheets, because they're a little bit more expensive, obviously. But if you can make the stretch, I wholeheartedly recommend that you do it. If you want something that's kind of a little bit cheaper but a little bit nicer than your standard sheet, then go for brushed cotton. So brushed cotton kind of feels soft, and it's got that nice kind of fluffy feel almost, and you can get a nice feel out of it without it having to be 400 thread count or whatever. So anyway, really boring conversation to start with, but you spend a third of your life in bed, and actually if you have a good night's sleep, you will be better in the day in terms of, being productive, being focused, and all of that good stuff. So I'm trying to stack the deck in my favour by getting a better night's sleep than I have done previously. So yeah, that's what's been going on in my week anyway. So.
It's definitely productivity related, because I found if I'm tired, there's nothing that will snap you out of being tired to just sort of go, do you know what, I'm going to focus on doing something today. Yeah. If you wake up and you've had a poor night's sleep, and I did have a poor night's sleep the other night because of my dog. Yeah. He was ill. He needed to go out every few hours. And Kerry sleeps like a log, so I couldn't wake her up. I mean, I've started to, but it's a bit of a push to like, get up. It's your turn. Right. But yeah, so I've been getting up in the middle of the night and going outside, letting him out, freezing to death. And then, imagine going from that Arctic, the Arctic temperatures, to then going back inside and trying to get warm to try and sleep again. Yeah. It doesn't have the same effect as the aircon in a hotel, unfortunately.
No. Rather unpleasant. But yeah, it does help. A good night's sleep does help. So can I just say that you're sounding very nice in my headphones today. Why don't you share with the world what I think was the best decision that you made this week?
Well, I am talking to you from some new technology. I'm talking from the new Apple MacBook Pro, and it is a sterling piece of kit. And I have to just do a public apology, like maybe a bit of a press release to say, look, in the last 8 episodes, I've been talking to Joe through AirPods and recording my microphone in high quality. So what you will hear is not what Joe's been hearing. And for that, I want to apologise to my friends, my family, and anyone else that's listening, because I feel like it was an attack on the senses.
It was an attack on my senses. The listeners got the delicious, crispy audio of your high quality microphone being recorded locally, but I got the well, I don't really quite know how to describe it, but the difference is night and day. Let's just say that. And you've done what I did a few weeks ago. I mean, I've been trying to get you to take the plunge for a while, because you've got the MacBook Pro. I bought the MacBook Air just before Christmas, and it chews through anything you throw at it. It is amazing, and we should probably do a deep dive in a month's time.
For sure. For sure.
Get your kind of feedback on how it's been versus your old. I think you had a 2018 MacBook Air, didn't you, before this?
Yeah, it was still good. This has been a bit bittersweet for me though, because it's something I've kind of worked my way up to. Like I started a production business to fund getting a Mac and anything else on top of that. That was the goal, because I was like, if I set myself a goal, maybe I'll work towards it and I'll put some effort into it. Because if it's not your full-time job and it's just like a bit of, it's a hobby you do on the side, having something to work towards was like the main focus for me. And once I purchased it, I was kind of like, this is it. And I was enlightened, but also it's like, well now what? I'm not going to wait until a new Mac comes out and go, that's the next goal. It's like, do I want some more hardware? Probably. But yeah, it's been fantastic. It's just kind of, I'm at the peak at the moment. And I feel like it's all downhill from here. It's just now a laptop to me. A day in, it's like, it's functional. And yeah, swapping all the stuff over was easy. And sorting out some plugins, fantastic.
I think you've touched on a wider point there in terms of materialistic gratification, right? There is that kind of initial, oh my God, there's this big new shiny thing. Oh, amazing. And then the way that technology is now, like when you get a new phone, it is this shiny new object for about 15, 20 minutes. And then you restore from an iCloud backup or from some sort of backup, and then it's just your old phone in a kind of a new, slightly shinier box. And that sheen just kind of dissipates.
That's my point. Like, I've got a different background on it, and it is far superior to my MacBook Air. Rest in peace, sweet MacBook Air. But that's it. I've restored from a time capsule backup, and I was like, well, that's literally where I left it. That's my old desktop. Different background, but all of the files in the same place.
There's pluses and minuses to that, though, right? There's the plus, which is you don't have to then recreate the computer from scratch. I didn't restore from a backup with this MacBook Air because I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. And I don't think I'd time machine back up that MacBook Pro for, I don't know, maybe a year. I just didn't do it because all of my documents were in the cloud. But now this is being backed up all the time by Time Machine because there's a lot more stuff locally. Because previously we weren't doing this, and that's a new requirement that I've got. But honestly, like going from a 5-year-old, 6-year-old MacBook Pro, which at the time was pretty top of the line, to a pretty much base layer MacBook Air without a fan. I did upgrade it to 16 gig of RAM, but this is like twice as fast as any other computer that I've used. And I do music production, I do podcast recording like we're doing right now. And let's take a step back and think about what we're doing at the moment, right? I've got Audio Hijack running, recording my audio. I'm doing Discord, speaking to you with a video call. And I've got 2 instances of Notion up, which is an Electron app, which is, computationally probably quite expensive versus like a native app. And I'm doing all of that at the same time, and it is just snappy, and it's not even breaking a sweat because it can't, because it hasn't got a fan. Do you know what I mean? It's insane. It's like an iPad or like an iPhone. It just does everything and goes, yeah, what? So yeah, I'm very, very happy for you, and I think that we'll put something in the diary in a month's time to kind of check in to see how you're getting on. But I'm very confident that you will continue to be delighted with your investment. So, shall we do Win of the Week?
Yeah.
Win of the Week is our segment where we get to share something that's happened this week that we'd like to celebrate, just to make sure that we start our conversation on a positive note, because sometimes it can go downhill pretty quickly. So we like to start on a positive. So Dan, what is your Win of the Week?
My Win of the Week is that I found, and I really should credit them, and I will in the show notes, but I found a Notion page called Ultimate Habit Tracking, and it's amazing. It's so simple, but it just says like, what were your thoughts for the day? And it's got a list, and it's like, how did you feel today? What was your list? And you just add a new note for each day. And at the bottom, it's like, what are you trying to track in terms of what do you do? So when you create a day, you can just literally look at all of the things you're trying to do and just drag it across and into the completed tab, and it will mark it in your Notion DB. So it's like, well, I think it calculates, like, it's pretty new to me, but it's like, well, it'll give you a percentage of how often
like
you
a
hit
progress
that goal
kind of thing. Yeah.
And for me, it was just like, I saw it and I was like, this is awesome, because I did use another one before and it was all flashy and it had like moving images, and I was like, this is cool, but it wasn't very functional.
Yeah.
So my win of the week is that I've actually been trying to keep a journal of stuff that I've learned, and it actually, how you do your shutdown process at the end of the day, it's not something I'm really good at doing. And I wanted to just kind of finish off my day and say, well, did I learn anything today? And that's one of the the sections. Did you learn anything today? What did you learn? Why was it beneficial? And it just kind of makes you think, what, today was a good day, or even if it was an unsuccessful day, you can track it and go, why was that unsuccessful? So that's my win of the week. I also have a secondary tab, which I'm hoping you maybe will bring up. So what was your win of the week?
Do you know what? Right, I'm trying to not get too corny here, but I'm very grateful that I have you as a friend, Dan.
Likewise.
Because both of my wins of the week involve your good self.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it does. Yeah, I genuinely feel gratitude for that. So I have two wins because I can never pick one thing, can I? My first one is I did some DIY, and I'm not a DIY person. And this was a pretty significant piece of DIY. It wasn't just painting a wall or anything like that. We had a fence that was pretty much dilapidated in the back garden, and we had someone come round and quote something completely astronomical to fix it. Honestly, it was like £1,200. And I kind of looked at it and went, nah, I could do that. How hard could it be, right? I mean, famous last words, right? Because
exactly.
Because it was harder than I thought. But I bought the fence panels from builders merchants. They arrived on like Wednesday, not last week before. And so after we recorded, I started painting the fences and then trying to get them in place. Now, we quickly realised that Kaylee and I weren't strong enough together, because I'm pretty strong, but Kaylee's she's not.
She's
stronger, not as strong as I.
But just not strong enough combined, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I pressed the big red button, the big emergency button. I rung you and I said, I kind of need some help. And credit to you, you dropped everything and you drove to my house, and Kerry and Kaylee had their mother's meeting or whatever it was. They had a good old chinwag, and we got it sorted. We had some setbacks and things like that where weirdly the fence panel was 1 inch shorter than the hole it needed to, 1 inch larger rather than the hole it needed to go in. So that was an interesting conundrum, but we got there in the end. So that was like I was really proud of myself actually. And I told my dad, and of all of the success that I've had in my career, both musically and I've had a very successful career doing what I do, right? My dad has never been so proud of me than when he phoned me after I sent him the pictures of the fence, and he was just like, Joe, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I was like, it was nice to hear, right? But then after I got the phone, I was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
he's more proud of me for putting up a fence than for the 10 years of success that I've had in the job that I do, and my success as a musician, previously, and all of this kind of stuff. Because I'm not a DIY person, and I just jumped in with 2 feet. I got help from my friend, and that was my win of the week. My second win of the week, which I'll make brief because that was a bit longer than I was planning on going on for. On your advice, I bought an Oculus Quest 2. I think actually it was our friend of the show, David, that ended up buying one, and his review, because he has a PSVR as well as I do, and he was like, look, it's night and day in terms of quality and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, you couldn't trust my opinion on what high definition was. So.
No, completely, because
we had different grading scales because I'd played PSVR once.
Yeah, and he owned one. He saw value in it, purchased it, and then was disappointed like I was. This is actually usable VR. That's kind of how I'll describe it. It's actually something that you can use for long periods of time without feeling like you're going to die. Sometimes you get a little bit motion sick, but because the quality is that much better, you can actually use it. So, and one of the things that I discovered a love for was Beat Saber. Now, Beat Saber is everyone knows what Beat Saber is. Basically, you've got these two battens that are lightsabers, and you have to almost do like in the old arcades, the arcades of old with the dance machines. You've got
to cheerleading, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And you hit the things in the right place. But actually, it's quite you do 3 or 4 songs, and you're a little out of breath. Like you if you really go for it, because if you could just half-ass it, but if you really go for it, it's quite a good workout. And I hit I hit all of my exercise rings on my Apple Watch twice this week, and I didn't do any other exercise apart from walking and Beat Saber. So yeah, I'll continue doing that. That's my win of the week.
It's actually a shock to me because I wasn't a fan of Beat Saber when I first played it.
Oh, really?
I just kind of thought, it's like, this is like Guitar Hero, but I'm swinging my arms around. It's definitely good, but it wasn't my thing. But then having, friends on it and just sort of all doing the same track and kind of ribbing each other when somebody loses, it gives it a whole nother layer to it. Like I was literally recommending to my brother this morning, like just jump on, like go on Beat Saber instead. Because like we were very much into like the shooting games and stuff like that, which is cool. And it's like, this is fun. But, and that's kind of what I thought you guys would be like. But when you jumped on and said, you know what, let's play Beat Saber, I thought, oh, here we go. I'll just give it a go. And I actually found that I really enjoyed it. And as you said, it's a bit of a workout as well.
So this week, we are discussing our journey with apps. The kind of inspiration for wanting to cover this is primarily my complete transformation in terms of the productivity technology that I'm now using to get the majority of my work done. And I didn't realize until I started kind of like putting the notes together how fundamentally different things are for me now versus before. And so I thought it might be fun to talk about how things have changed for us in the last few years in terms of the kind of the productivity technology that we use, some of the failed experiments that we might have done, and basically where we've landed now and what we might look to do in the future potentially, if anything, in terms of, trying new things. So I thought that'd be quite a fun topic to talk about today. So
yeah, definitely.
I don't know whether you want to start with, because I know that you've put together some history, so it'd be quite good to go through that to start with, and then we can talk about my timeline that I've put together. So again, I've written an article in the show notes.
Starting in 1901 to 2021, I'm all ears, mate. So we kind of mention on the show quite often that our lives were pretty similar, even in terms of working. I know we've arrived at different areas and we're doing different roles now, but we've kind of had a similar work experience in terms of retail and stuff like that. So I worked in warehouses, so really no need for keeping documentation for me. I just worked in a warehouse. That was it. Multiple different warehouses. I worked in a warehouse once where my sole job was to wait outside. I could go in the warehouse. I wasn't banned from going in, but I'd wait outside and a big 18-wheeler would turn up full of carpets. And my job, this was not automated, my job was to go into that lorry and move all of the carpets that were 6 foot tall. You had to bear hug them, and I'd move all of the carpets out of that lorry into another lorry and come home covered in dust. That was my job.
Wow.
So
you don't really need any apps for that, do you?
No, that's what I mean. Like, it's worth just kind of highlighting that I wouldn't have to keep any documentation and be like, right, my job, carpet from from A to B, and then keeping a log of it. It's all logged in the warehouse and stuff like that. Anyway, so I worked in warehouses. Then I worked in retail. I mean, you could argue that you could use apps for retail, like maintaining your rota, using calendars and stuff like that. But
that's more of a company thing than a personal thing, isn't it, though?
Exactly. So I would take pictures of the rota, and that's kind of it. I'd be take that home with me so I know what I'm working. Like if I was going back to retail now, I'd probably say, can I have 6 months worth of rota and just put it in? So I could, at the moment, I have a notification to kind of let me know when I'm on call.
Right.
Which is inbuilt to Apple, but I'll come on to that. So now it kind of transitioned. I had multiple other jobs between there, but they're not really relevant. It was just kind of giving you a bit of history in terms of why I haven't really used any apps up until now.
Yeah. Then
I moved into an engineering role, and it was a huge need for you get bombarded with data.
Oh yeah.
And you have to kind of be like, someone actually said to me, when you work in engineering, you kind of just have to be a sponge and take as much information as you can. So for the last 10 years or so, I've been in a position where I've at least tried to store data. And because it's lots, it's like tech guides, odds and sods in terms of issues I've experienced. Because sometimes when you're working with software, you have bugs, you have things that you might come across again. And it's like, well, this was a nightmare to fix. So I don't want to have to try and fix it again. Like case in point, I had somebody message me, a ticket raised, and spoke to a client yesterday who was asking about like installing a particular product on one of our products. And I just sent him the CLI commands. And for me, it was easier to put that in Notion and be like, I know how to do it, but I've never documented it.
Right.
So I put it in Notion in, I don't know if you've ever used it, the code blocks.
Yeah.
I think I've shown you. So the code blocks are wicked. And I just put it in a code block, screenshot the page and just sent it to him. Because exporting a PDF was like, I don't want to be sending PDFs across. It's like, just give him my own document. So yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily want to jump straight into apps because I wanted to talk about my mentality when it kind of came to data flow.
Yeah, okay.
Because I needed to change my data flow very quickly as I struggled to study as well. Like when I started engineering 10 years ago, I'd been out of school, I'd been out of college. And I'd just been working jobs in, as I said, warehouses, retail, all different places, coffee shops and stuff like that. So I hadn't needed to do exams and stuff.
Yeah.
And when I came into engineering, it was like a big part of you need to be qualified. I think at my first engineering job, they were like, you need to be qualified within 6 months. And going from knowing nothing to then knowing like the fundamentals and the basics of, I guess, everything that we're doing within the particular products was a huge issue for me. So I started with OneNote as well. But yeah, I mean, I also, I've made a note here because I also went from being someone that had very much a physical copy of everything.
Okay.
So I would have like physical hard drives, and then I'd have memory sticks, even SD cards, because I was like, something feels so good and so primal, I guess, about just having something to be like, this, mine, my data here.
It's a sign of the times as well, though, because we're talking about like the early 2010s, 2011s here.
Yeah.
And back then, that was the way that you would share data. You didn't have, I think Dropbox had just kind of started becoming a thing. And I mean, back then, we'd never pay for software. We'd get everything for free because that was just the way that we were kind of, trained, I guess, or indoctrinated into the world that software shouldn't cost anything.
And that's why all our machines were screwed. So
yeah, because we just kept downloading nefarious application. But yeah, so you went from physical hard drives and memory sticks and all of that. So what did that transition look like to, I'm guessing, like a cloud service, right?
Yeah. And I moved to Dropbox and I've never looked back. That's literally it. It's a very simple transition. I looked up and I was like, I need to store documents. How do I want to do it? All right, there's Dropbox. And I started putting stuff in there and I started organizing it. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I never have to, what?
Yeah.
So if I move to another machine, I can just log into Dropbox. Yup. What? And I can download my files. Yup.
It's almost magical, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, on my work laptop, I'm signed into Dropbox and I selectively sync my work folders.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've got the same account, but I only selectively sync. And to be honest, it's really good for production because if you're working on a project and you upload it, you can just put it in Dropbox and then unsync it from your computer. So you're like, well, I'm not working on that. I don't want to take up space.
No.
And then when it comes back to it and you're like, I really need to work back on that project. So when you're working as a producer, I mean, you could just be cut and dry and be like, that song's done, goodbye. But then if they come back 6 months later and go, I want to do a remix of that. And you're like, I deleted it. Like, at what point do you go, well, sorry? It's like, I don't have any need to store it, but for me, it's like, that's how I feel. Yeah. If I'd worked with a producer and then asked for some files, I mean, it's probably my fault, I should have taken it at the time, but that's just, how I am. I store everything.
No, I think that's the right thing to do, just to kind of, reinforce the way that you look at the world. I'm exactly the same. I store everything. The only reason why I was able to kind of, timeline my journey with the different apps that I use is because I kept everything. I have stuff from 2013 still that isn't relevant, but it's like, you never know. I'm basically a digital hoarder.
So am I. So am I. And also, annoyingly, I've just given this whole, long speech, long-winded way of saying, do you know what? I've stepped away from hardware. I'm working with Dropbox specifically.
Yeah.
I literally have, I bought that Samsung 1 terabyte hard drive on your recommendation, and I still put all of my stuff on there because it's like sometimes you'll be in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this is maybe not in these times, but before I'd travel and it's like, well, the Wi-Fi's down. I need to work on this project. If it's not there, if I can't access Dropbox and I hadn't selectively downloaded it before, like there's pros and cons. You don't want to have everything stored on your laptop and you don't want to have everything stored in the cloud at both places, duplicated and stuff like that. And recently I've just been advertised a very robust looking 1 terabyte USB stick. So maybe that journey is just starting again. Maybe I'm going full circle.
I think there's something to be said about an external hard drive. And I don't use lots of them, but I have one. I have two. I've got my time machine.
I have two. I have 8.
Yeah. Well, there's loads of old ones knocking about that I don't use anymore, but there's 2 primary ones that I use. I've got an old spinning hard drive, which I use for my time machine backup. Mm-hmm. And then I've got the Samsung I think it's a T4 or T something.
Yeah, that's the one
with
T7.
the fingerprint. Yeah. T7, there you go. Yeah, I was nowhere near. And I didn't set up the fingerprint thing because it just looked like bloatware to me. But I think I bought the 500 gigabyte one, and it was specifically to make sure that I'm backing up, audio projects and any video projects that I'm doing. And it's really fast. It runs like an internal SSD. It's just as quick, and it connects via USB-C. So yeah, happy days. So I think there's something to be said for external storage still, but broadly speaking, you can kind of get away with cloud storage just for most things. For sure.
I mean, this whole episode is a bit of a test because you're kind of taking me for a ride with 2 consecutive episodes. Obviously, episode 8 was solely about failure, and now you're opening me up to a tirade of criticism about, again, my failures to store data. Like,
I just love bringing the mood down. I've been known for my bleak attitude, and failure is an interesting thing though, because as we talked about last week, I think failure is not a negative, but I think learning from what didn't work helps you know what will work. I mean, I'll come to what I've learned in my journey in a minute.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, so if we start at the beginning of your sales career in, what was it, 1901 onwards, if we just start there and then you can bring it up to recent and we'll go from,
Well, back then I had a typewriter, so, No, so do you know what? I took a look at this, and it was difficult to sort of patch together the early points of my note-taking, task management and things like that. But I'd realised that actually from a note-taking point of view, nothing had changed really from 2014 to early 2019 from a general process point of view. So for that entire time, I was using Microsoft OneNote as my primary note-taking app for work. I was using Apple Notes as well for some personal stuff, or just for, holding my Wi-Fi password or something like that. But
I've moved my Wi-Fi into a password manager. You can add like a secure note, and it's just been bliss because I was exactly the same, looking through my notes, and I'd have to search because I don't save it under Wi-Fi password. It'll be either under the SSID or it'll be something else, because I'm like, if somebody breaks into my phone and they're going to connect to my Wi-Fi. So, well, who's going to be breaking into my phone and be in my house and think, do you know what, let me connect this guy's phone's disconnected from his Wi-Fi, let me reconnect.
Yeah.
Makes no sense, but for some reason my brain's like, better secure that. So now it's in my password manager, which that feels like a proper weight has been lifted from my shoulders.
Yeah, you're making the most of your annual subscription with that password password manager. I did the exact same thing, to be fair, so I can't really criticize. So OneNote started in my world as literally just writing notes and not really having any kind of organizational structure, but it was great for just being able to click anywhere on a page, write a note and kind of format things and have a little table in line and things like that. It's actually I still think it's a really good app, and for something that's free, amazing. It's brilliant actually how much you can get done with it with a free app. And something that just is free for everybody. I don't even think you need an Office 365 subscription. I think you could just download it, and get a Hotmail account or whatever it is, and then you're good to go. But it got to like 2019, late 2019, and I'd evolved what I was using OneNote for quite significantly, and I was trying to really organize things in a way that really I was kind of knocking up against the limitations with the product, and I started to feel like, okay, something needs to change here. I mean, OneNote's primary benefit really is the infinite canvas. So, you click a new note and it's just empty. And so, as I said earlier, you can basically throw anything on that infinite canvas. You can put text, tables, icons, websites, pictures, you name it, it can handle it.
You can also highlight your text on it. I was going to talk about OneNote as well, because I used it for study when I first started. Okay. And the reason for that is that I could have OneNote and I could put it on the iPad or whatever I was using and highlight bits that are important, like, oh, this might be in the exam, or that's something I need to remember. And you could just click it with the mouse and kind of highlight across it. So it's really cool. But I suppose maybe it's not the apps that have the limitations, but kind of your mentality that goes towards it. Because I was thinking the same with OneNote. Like when I was using it, it kind of had like, I called it the Cecil Hotel mentality, because it was just where things came to die. Like I just threw stuff in it and just left it there.
That is a niche reference. That is. I like that.
It's a current reference. That. Get woke.
Yeah, okay. Anyone with a Netflix subscription, watch the Cecil Hotel documentary. It's very, very good. Anyway.
No, so I tried my best to get things organized into tabs, but keeping it up to date for me was a nightmare. I just couldn't work out a way to keep everything in certain sections. So I'd be like, right, I'm talking about this technology, and then it'd be tab, and then it'd be a page under a tab, and then another page, and then a sticky note on top of that, and then all of these highlighted notes, and it became very, very cluttered for me. So I do feel it's my fault as not as much of an application issue. I didn't run into any limitations with OneNote, if I'm honest. And you could also embed web pages in it, which was cool. So if you went to a website and just clicked the OneNote clip tool or whatever, you could just download a page. So for guides and stuff, I'd be like, I need to remember that. Instead of bookmarking it, I'll download it to OneNote.
I think even to this day, OneNote is one of my favorite note-taking apps, because it doesn't feel like it gets in your way or has too much of an opinion on what a note-taking app should be. And it gives you decent, straightforward, easy-to-use tools to play with, essentially, and just lets you get on with it, right? I guess I was trying to use OneNote for something that OneNote wasn't necessarily designed for at the end. And so, for a number of years, it was my de facto holding area for all of my customer notes and all of my meeting notes and things like that. And it worked. It was fine. And so, for a long time, it was good. And so that obviously has changed now, and I've moved on. But I'd be keen to flip back to yourself, because you mentioned that there were some apps that you used to use. So you used to have OneNote on the note-taking side. What about on the task management side? Because that was kind of where I was going to go next, but I'd be keen to understand what your journey looked like and where you ended up landing.
So I've had Todoist for many years, many years, but that's not to say I've used it as intended for many, many years. Yeah. I used To-Do, which was, I can't remember if the app's actually called that. It might be just not Microsoft To-Do, but another one that was in the App Store.
To-Do, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a blue box, and it was good. But then I couldn't migrate that to Windows at the time, and I just got a bit fed up. So the reason I liked Todoist is that it was available on all platforms and web-based, so I could just, if I was anywhere, I could add a note to it. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really experiment too much with to-do lists. I didn't really have many failures regarding it. I don't just want to sit here and sing the praises of Todoist as I do every other episode. Not every other episode, every bloody episode. So
it's like you're sponsored by Todoist.
No, I just love it.
Yeah, it's good. It is good.
The hardest thing I found about getting settled, though, was working out what I wanted to classify as a task, as we discussed in episode 1. Episode 1, Task Wars, the Phantom Menace, or whatever it was. No, I just struggled with it.
We should have called it that. Anyway.
Hindsight. No, I struggled for months with Todoist, if not years. But for me, I feel like the perseverance was worth it with that app. Yeah. Because you find a way that it works for you. So what did you use for, your to-do lists? If you tell me it's a sticky note on the fridge.
Yeah, I'd get kicked off of my own podcast, I guess, if that was the case.
Correct.
So I flip-flopped between various different solutions between 2014 and 2019, because for the longest time, note-taking and task management were very separate things in my mind, and it's because I didn't really know any better. And I used to have my note-taking app for my notes and my task management app for my tasks. And I tried many, many task managers over the years, and the ones that didn't make the cut, I'll kind of rattle through them because there was quite a few, but I'll just be brief. So I tried OmniFocus, which is quite a popular tool. It was too complicated for me. At the time, it was too complicated anyway. I would probably get on with it a lot more now. Now I'm a bit more of a power user, but at the time, it was far too complicated. And they had a web app that, at this time, I was using Windows. I wasn't kind of all Mac. And they had a web app which was mental. It was so different to the iOS app. I think it's still pretty different, but it just didn't look particularly user-friendly. And it was also quite expensive as well. So I think I gave the 2-month free trial. And at the end of the free trial, I stopped using it. I was just like, it's too complicated for me, and I don't really want to spend £30 a year or whatever it was, which isn't a lot of money, but this was my kind of mindset at the time. I don't want to spend money on software.
But if it doesn't work for you over 2 months, right? Well, why would you spend money on it?
Exactly.
It's what works for you, and if it's not working, then don't splash the cash.
Don't splash the cash. Exactly. So then I switched to a product called TickTick. And this was off of the back of something that a YouTuber that I watch, YouTube person, MKBHD. He's everyone knows who he is. He's a very, very famous technology reporter, podcaster, YouTube person. And that was pretty good, actually. That was very similar, actually, to what Todoist gives you. It's got quite a nice feature where it kind of gives you, it's kind of gamifies task management, where it puts you in like a ranking system with all of the other users in terms of, okay, you've completed this many tasks, you're kind of at this rank sort of thing. And I know that Todoist does that and has a whole kind of
karma, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it pits you against other users, because you could just open and close as many tasks as you want, really. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I'd be keen to explore that, because I'd love to compete and show you how busy I am versus someone else.
Yeah, I don't really care about that though. You could be as busy as you like, mate. It's your deal. It's your deal.
Well, there's no competition if you're not going to fight back, to be honest.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realise that.
Whatever then.
Didn't realise there was a thing we were doing. But yeah, TickTick was good, but just on iOS. And the web app was bad. Just bad. I think it was a beta at the time. So, it's probably better now. I mean, this is probably about three years ago. And I tried Trello. I think I tried Trello because, and I think you've mentioned Trello as well, or you're about to, so sorry for stealing your thunder, because we used it on an old project that we were doing that never really sort of saw the light of day. And it had some nice features, but I wasn't really kind of in deep on the Kanban kind of thing for tasks. Like, projects make sense from a Kanban point of view in terms of, the Kanban being the status. But for like individual tasks, they didn't live that long in order for it to warrant being in a Kanban. A list was fine.
No. Trello is really good for longer term goals, is what I found. But that was my first introduction to a Kanban board, and I loved it. And you owe everything to Trello, if I'm completely honest. You owe literally every fibre of your being to Trello in the sense that it introduced you to Notion.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think broadly it did, I think broadly
there was no problem with Trello. I'm going to categorically say that we had no problem with Trello.
No.
And it didn't work for us, but I used the Kanban function in Notion because of this. Literally, the way it worked is we were like, Trello's okay, but it just does the one thing, and we've got to have another account. How are we going to store data? And then we just started looking up, products that support Kanban boards.
Yeah.
That was how we started, and then we stumbled across Notion, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I'll come back to the Notion discovery in a tick, but I think you're broadly right. Actually, I think that we were looking for something that just did a little bit more than Trello, in terms of, Trello is not a one-trick pony. That's not really fair, but it does what it does very well. But it doesn't have a broad kind of a broad function set. I think actually they've changed that recently, where they've added a load of additional kind of Notion-esque kind of features for some of the upper tiers of what they do, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I also apparently used Things, which is kind of
that's what I was trying to think of. That's the last one on my list. I've got a list of applications I used, and that is one that I used as well. That might be the one that I was talking about with the blue icon and the tick.
It is. It is, yeah, absolutely. Because I know what To Do is. That's another app, right? That I have never used, but I've seen it on the App Store. Like they've got Things 3 now, and I had Things 1. And apparently, I downloaded them. I also downloaded Remember the Milk as well. Again, apparently I downloaded them, but I literally can't remember using them, so I have no kind of feedback.
What a name! Remember the Milk, and I love it.
The app icon is just horrific. It's a cow. It's like, I don't want to use an app with a logo that's a cow. I just don't want to, like, it doesn't...
I feel you.
Scream productivity to me. And so the last thing that I tried to do before I kind of moved everything into the Microsoft ecosystem was I tried to use my company's CRM system, which is Salesforce. And this actually gave me a lot of what I ended up really valuing in my current system. For example, linking tasks to projects and customers, which in themselves, the records of those projects and customers in themselves were buckets for additional information. And actually the relational things that Notion is so strong at actually kind of was born from my use of a CRM system. But it would be only for work. Obviously, I wouldn't put my personal tasks in there. So, and also I have no control over adding new fields and actually the way that it's set up. And one of the things that was really important for me at the time was mobile capability. And the mobile experience is okay for updating things that my company needs me to update. But in the day in, day out task management, it's horrific. It's just not nice. It's not a good experience, personally. So from all of these experiments, one of the main things that I was kind of bumping up against was that primarily my notes would include actions. And so when I'd be taking notes in a meeting, the actions would be at the end and I'd write them down. And then I would have to transpose those into my task manager. Then when I was going to find the thing to do, and when it came up in my task manager, I would need to go back into my notes, find the place where I wrote the original note to get the context. And it just felt like that was just a bit too much friction for me. So that was when I started the journey to find something that was a bit more sort of holistic and a bit more integrated and a bit more cohesive.
This is kind of the same issue I had with OneNote in terms of duplication of data and stuff like that. Is like when I was using OneNote, I'd have to, and I actually found a quite cool feature. If you press Control-1, it creates like a little tick box. So you could be like, oh, action, and then tick that off. But it's like, well, nobody sees that. Unless I'm looking at it, I don't care. And I didn't get that sense of gratification from just ticking a toggle box and going tick, tick. And I think Notion does that really well in that it strikes through and you can actually, if you complete a task, it's got a line through it and you're like, well, that's what I've achieved.
Yeah.
I feel like we're delicately bumping towards Notion and why we love it so much. Have you got a couple more apps that you've used before we get to there? Because I feel like there's a lot to say for it because it's so diverse.
So I'll kind of talk you through how I went Microsoft Everything for a year.
Yeah.
That's probably a good place to kind of go. Because like you, I stuck with OneNote because it was what I knew, right? And I didn't really know anything else. And it kind of made sense to stay within the Microsoft ecosystem because I was primarily a Windows user at this point for work. And I was already using OneNote, as I said. So I started with literally as you've described. So I just started using the feature in OneNote to make a line of text, a checkbox. So the kind of Control-1 piece of functionality then adds a little checkbox to that line that you've written, and then you can tick it off if you like. Now, there's a function in OneNote where you can run a search for all checkboxes in your notebook.
Yeah, I did not know
You looked surprised. So for the listener, you looked surprised. So I can't remember where it is, and it is only in the Windows app, which was one of its main downfalls, and only in the old OneNote 2016 app as well. So the one that's in the Windows Store, which is like the web app, it isn't in there. So it's like an old legacy piece of functionality, which is why I didn't stick with it. So it basically presented all of the checkboxes on the right-hand side, so you could kind of work through them as a list. So it would kind of like, it would spool all of the various checkboxes that you've got across your notebook and then give you a list of stuff that you need to do. So it was kind of close enough for rock and roll for a while. However, it doesn't provide any additional functionality from what I remember in terms of like adding a due date or tags or any of that kind of, things that you would expect from a task manager. And it was a search pane. So the UX was just not very nice. I didn't feel like I could rely on it because it was a search.
Well, I mean, I hadn't used it for years, but I felt as well that when you were trying to put like a table in it or something like that, it was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agreed with that, like, and this is kind of where I compared it to Notion, in that if you wanted to create like a relational database or put stuff in there and add new fields, you would think that Microsoft would be the front runner in terms of like just embedding a table and stuff like that. And it probably is that way now, if I'm honest. I haven't used it for a while.
No, it's still just basic.
Yeah, so when I did use it, I was trying to create like a table and be like, right, so let me link that to this page here. And it just didn't feel very comfortable to do, if I'm completely honest. But
it's a lot of hand cranking. So you could do like links. You could make, like a hyperlink to the other page, but it would be a lot of hand cranking in order to do that. So it's not like what you can do in Notion. And also, importantly, fundamentally, that search was only on that old, at the time, deprecated OneNote app. So it wasn't on the new OneNote app, it wasn't on the Mac app, and it also didn't work on mobile. So it was kind of one of my primary sort of requirements was whatever I use, it has to be able to be used on a phone, because actually a lot of the work that I do was on the phone. Because I was traveling so much at the time, I did a surprisingly large amount of work on my phone. So I then discovered it was a bit of a hack that I discovered, but I'm glad I did, because it actually lasted for a good 6 to 8 months in terms of primary task management. Was in that same Windows app, which again, this is the annoying thing about OneNote, is they had an old 2016 app which was brilliant, and then they scrapped it for ages, and then brought out this UWA app. It's like a Windowsy thing. Basically, it was the new app, right? And it was the Office 365 version of OneNote, and it was just garbage. Yeah. It just didn't have all the functionality that the old desktop app had, and so it was clear that they were end of lifing that, and they weren't developing it. So it wasn't a go forward position for me that I was comfortable with. But what this had is the ability to tag a line of text as an Outlook task. So rather than it just being a checkbox, it came up with the little red flag, which is the same red flag that comes up in your flagged emails, right? So what that did is then pushed that Outlook task into the tasks part of your Outlook application. So, which is the same place where all of your flagged emails go. So you then started to get a consistent list of, okay, these are all the things that I've captured in terms of next actions, and these are all of the emails that I've flagged for further reading. So essentially a one task list to kind of rule them all, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, like a single pane of glass kind of thing.
Exactly.
Which is what everyone wants, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So finally, I had some integration. I had something to start with, albeit it was a bit rough around the edges. And it also didn't quite resolve the mobile use case, because at the time, it would only appear in Outlook for the desktop app, right? However, after a bit of additional research, I discovered that Microsoft had recently bought Wunderlist, which was a really popular task manager that I hadn't tried before, and they were making it into Microsoft To Do, which would soon interface with Outlook tasks and flagged emails. So my process ended up being, in OneNote, I would take notes on the meeting and capture my actions, and then I would flag those actions using the Outlook task tag, and then I would wait for an indeterminate amount of time. And then the task would, most of the time, appear in the Outlook app under tasks, and by the nature of that, these would appear in Microsoft To Do, which had a really nice mobile app. So I was basically almost there in terms of what I thought I needed.
Synergy. That's what we're after. Synergy.
Exactly. So it was only one-way integration, which was a bit of a problem, and it was a little unreliable. But I could start to see broadly kind of what a good system would look like for me. So it only took me 7 years, right? And so I used that for like 9 months, and for a time I didn't know any better, and I just cracked on with this way of working for a long time. So that kind of brings me up to the next part of my journey. So before I kind of go into that, was there any other apps that you used that you used and then ditched over the period of time to kind of get you to where you are now?
I'm going to talk about a very, very recent one, which is not my favorite, and this might hurt you, but you set me a challenge a couple of weeks back to use Toggle.
I did.
I do not like it. It's not for me. But
okay.
Sorry to be so, that's my stern voice, obviously.
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of a failure on my part, because I just don't like it. I've started using it, And for my line of work, it does not work.
Right.
Maybe it requires some fine tuning and I might get on board with it. But it's kind of hard to break out of that habit because I have Forest, which I use and I love.
Yeah.
And maybe love is, I don't love it. I like it. It's a good app.
Yeah.
But Forest, I've got shortcuts on my phone where I can click it and I'm like, I'm going to work. Like, it's literally a little widget on my home screen where it's like, I'm doing work for 25 minutes because then I can focus. And it's like getting that same functionality out of Toggle is doable, I assume, but I just haven't done it yet. And it's like, and this is where I think it'll probably kind of lean into what you're going to say about Notion in terms of migrating data, and also possibly the reason why you stuck with OneNote for 7 years, because you get to a point and you start using something and you're like, well, that's data. Oh, there's more. There's my actions. And then it's like, well, if I want to pick up something else, I can't just like copy a OneNote and import it to that kind of platform. And even if you did, you got to ask yourself, would you want to?
Yeah.
Because if I look at my OneNote now from whatever 2015 and before, is there stuff that I'm going to find of value in there? Because software's moved on. I might see something for a piece of software that's version 7. It's like, well, maybe we're on version 15 now. Like, is that still going to be relevant? If somebody calls me up and says I'm on version 7, it's like, maybe, it's 2021. Can you come up to date? Like, why am I going to keep looking into that sort of stuff? I also used Streaks, which I mentioned in quite a few of our episodes, and that was ultimate. And this is what I mean about sometimes perseverance really works, because Streaks for me, I used for the wrong purpose. I tried following up, I tried creating streaks for like press ups, because I was trying to get healthy, and I was like, cool, I was doing 100 press ups a day, and the way I was doing it is setting a streak for, I'll do 10 lots of 10.
Yeah.
But then it was like, well, all I'm doing is clicking a button just to say I've done 10 press ups. And then I'd be like, oh, this is long, I'm doing 10 press-ups and then tapping it. And then I'd migrate it to 20, tapping it. And then I'd miss a streak and be like, well, I just don't care. Like,
no.
I don't care if I've missed, physically your body needs time to recover. And it feels harder to count, especially when you need like natural rest between. Sometimes you'll wake up and be like, my arms really hurt, I don't want to do press-ups. And then you feel like you've let yourself down because you've missed a streak day.
Yeah.
But then I found so much value in that in terms of keeping a streak for things that matter, like not drinking, which, I've been honest about in earlier episodes, just in terms of how that helped me to keep a track of, like, I haven't drunk alcohol in like 412 days or something like that. Amazing. Which is mental to think, considering how much I used to drink, and like Streaks has been a huge part of that. So, there's ultimately loads of failures that come with it, but then loads of successes that come out of it from perseverance. And I just completely ripped out all of my tasks from it and just started fresh. And same with like Toggle, maybe I need to do that and kind of reevaluate, but it works really well for you because you have like sales-based focus and non-sales-based efforts, what I think is what you called it. Yeah. Whereas for me, I was trying to calculate like, what's a work-based task to me? How do I categorize that? When I already categorize it in Notion, I categorize it in Todoist. When we were on getting the podcast sorted for release, it was like we were talking about what do you need to do? You put it in your to-do list, and then I was just typing it up as well, saying this is for me, cool, assigned to me. Obviously, I don't assign it when it's my own task, but it's like categorized under Thrive Guys, and just I can track it very easily. So maybe I'll get involved in Toggle, but...
Well, I think the app is bad, right? It's objectively a bad piece of software, but time tracking is useful, I think. So the process, as long as you're doing it in some way, it kind of feels like for you, you're using it as a thing to use to focus. Whereas for me, it's okay, I need to be intentional about what I'm going to do next. And if this is a thing that I'm going to do which is not sales based, I need to know that I'm on the clock and that I need to get it done as quickly as possible. So I'm not necessarily saying that I'm going to focus for 25 minutes and then take a break. I use it as a method of being accountable for my time and understanding the data behind how I'm spending my time. So it has a Pomodoro in it, but you're probably better off, if that's your kind of primary use case, using something like Forest, because it's just a much nicer experience, and they've kind of gamified that whole staying focused and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a horses and courses sort of scenario, right? I have a different principle for time tracking than you do, and so the app that I use is probably more appropriate for what I'm trying to achieve, whereas it's probably not so for what you're trying to achieve. So I think that's an important thing as well, right? Don't try and push a square peg in a round hole. You know, if there's something that is going to line up exactly with what you're trying to achieve, just lean into it. Don't listen to me. I use it for something different. So
no, but that was my point though. Is like you don't know unless you try. And for me,
sure.
Toggle, you know, it didn't have the function that I wanted, and because I work in a ticketing based system, it just seems like extra work. And I could do a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do in Notion and Todoist. So I think it is probably about that special time where we talk about Notion.
Yes.
You definitely have a lot to say for Notion, but we still use them very differently. The biggest issue I had was the daunting task of putting stuff in Notion.
Yeah.
From whatever you're using, whether it's documents in OneDrive, documents in OneNote, whatever the hell you're using, it is daunting because you set up Notion and you look at it and it's blank. It's got nothing. They've got so many good templates that you can use, and getting your head around them is, you know, invaluable to the experience. Go onto their website and duplicate some of their pages. That's what I was saying about the ultimate habit tracking. I didn't design it. I looked at it and I was like, I could repurpose a lot of that, and I did. So I didn't really use Notion to its fullest extent when I first got it. I used it without pages really.
Right.
So it'd be like, here's one whole page on the left hand side and it's got everything in it. Yeah. And then I realized that I could split down into further pages. So I'd split by technology and then different things. And like I also just had it where I embedded a calendar into it for some of my music stuff. Because you can have like notifications and stuff like that, and it'll pop up as a Notion notification. Yeah. So the reason I had so much success with Notion is because I started off by doing just my production stuff in it. Yeah. So the way it'd work is somebody would call me up and say, can we work on a track together? And I'd be like, yep. You know, take their artist name. I would send them my Google Docs form, which is like saying, you know, who do you want to sound like, what your influence is, all that sort of good stuff. And that Google Doc, I would always struggle to find the link to it because I've got to log in and find what Google Doc I'd set up. Now I had a place where I've got my production page in Notion that I can just click in and I go, right, there's my Google Doc. This is the person's page that you could share on the web and say, right, this is your, you know, your artist page. Yeah. If you want the files, I'll upload them to here. Nice. If you want to know where a track is or what state a track's in, I put it into a Kanban board, which kind of links back to earlier in Trello. Yeah. And this is what inspired me to do it, is I'd have discussing, recorded, edited, mixed, mastered, released. Yeah. So then nice. We have a constant track of that. If somebody calls me up and says, oh, we worked together on a track in 2018, can we do another one? And I say, yeah, cool. And I've got the files in there. I've got the links to what they do, whether it was released, what state did we get it into? Yeah. And for me, that was just hugely beneficial because anytime somebody calls me and says, oh, can we do a track together? I don't have to think, oh, who's this? You know, what have we done before? Where is it? I can just look and go, right, here's their, like literally at the end of it in my released note, in the Kanban board, I can put, this is their link on Spotify. This is who they are. This is, you know, this is their old document. I don't have to think about it. It's really, really good.
That's amazing. I love that it's kind of worked for you like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I then started using it for work and I've kind of never looked back. And we use it for this podcast.
We do.
And that's what I mean. I can look at your notes just in there in a page. I can look at, you know, what the outline is for it. So we don't actually have to talk in the week. We do that out of sheer joy. We don't have to talk. We could run this podcast one day a week and not have to talk because we can talk through text.
Well, do you know what? We actually don't have like meetings about the podcast. We don't really do a lot of like face-to-face stuff outside of our conversations, which are, you know, an hour and a half or so every Saturday morning. And the reason why we're able to do that and get away from meetings on meetings on meetings, which, you know, I do enough of that in my professional life. I don't want to do that doing this, is because we can dip into the same repository and look at what each other is sort of putting together in terms of their sort of outline of what they want to discuss, and we can then weave our conversations into each other, and it's just a much better way of us kind of interacting and kind of, you know, agreeing an outline versus what we did at the start of, you know, in episode 1, and you know, where we would just go, right, a couple of bullet points, let's just have a conflab. You know, we're a lot more focused with it now, but we don't have to have meetings on meetings on meetings. It's we've not upped our amount of engagement time, but we've actually upped our quality of output as a result of that, and that's only because we've been able to collaborate on a tool like Notion. So I think it's been hugely valuable for us to get this off the ground, and you know, I'm really glad that you've continued to get value from it, because believe it or not, it was early June 2020 that we discovered it. And
I was going to say, how is it that you know it?
Well, I did some research. I looked back through all of the conversations that we'd had, and I basically searched for Notion, and I found where we'd started talking about it. So I want to talk separately about my love letter to Notion, and we're probably going to have to do a whole episode on it. And I'm currently writing an article on my love letter to Notion because it's getting a lot of negative rap at the moment because of some of the performance issues that are happening right now. But what I want to do is just explain how this came about initially for me.
Yeah, go for it.
So I ended up going down a bit of a productivity rabbit hole on YouTube one summer's day because, based on what I was talking about earlier with kind of where I'd ended up with the Microsoft stuff, I could start to see broadly what a good system would look like for me, but it wasn't quite what I wanted in the current sort of system. And in this productivity rabbit hole on YouTube, I kept seeing Notion being talked about. And honestly, I poo-pooed Notion initially because I thought the logo looked stupid. I thought it looked like, some like writing app, like some fancy, writing app for technology people. Technology journalists and stuff, and I was just like, that's not for me.
Technology people.
Yeah. All them technology people. So, and I thought it looked stupid, and I was like, oh, it looks like a crap app. It doesn't look very modern or like, literally just from the logo. Like, this is the insanity.
Is this your idea of a love letter?
Well, no, I'm talking about how crazy it is that you see something about in your kind of sphere of consciousness for a while, and then you actually go, hang on, I'm actually going to take a look at it. And then you realize this is what you were searching for all along. And so I watched someone called August Bradley's video, and the video is called Why Notion Changes Everything. This was the first proper Notion video I watched from start to finish. And this is where the penny dropped for me on it. And it also coincided with the time, coincidentally, that they added a free tier to there, because it used to be just a subscription that you would buy, and they added a free tier. So I thought, flip it, I'll give it a go. This guy thinks it's really good, and these are the reasons why. Let's give it a try. And so I downloaded it, I opened it up, and I started to see, okay, I can get a significant amount of value from this. And the way I set it up initially was I followed a lot of the principles that August outlines in his video series. And sidebar, if you want to understand the principles of why Notion is so good, I would suggest watching his series. If you want further reading, further watching, go watch his series, start to finish, dear listener. It will give you the best synopsis of why this is something that people should at least be considering to kind of, supercharge their productivity. The power with Notion is the way that it does sort of relational databases. Connecting these different things together has emergent benefit. It's worth more than the sum of its parts. And I think I've said this a couple of times before, but it's so important. It's kind of the critical sort of linchpin that is why Notion is. That's why people love it so much, and why people are like, hang on a minute, this is actually next level. This is kind of the next step in terms of software development, etc. And what I mean by that relational database feature is things can be connected to each other both ways, and you can navigate it like a website or an actual app. And so I took a step back the other day, and I was thinking about it, and I've realized that I've actually created my own piece of software from the ground up, right? I've created my whole entire system, and I've sculpted it myself with my own hands to my own needs. And that's actually bananas when you think about it, because I've literally created my own software product without a single line of code being written.
It's crazy because it works so well for you as well. And you know what I like? And maybe I'm just jumping ahead here, but in terms of visually, it's quirky, but once you get into it, it is very user friendly.
Absolutely.
And like it's all this crap, like just install, putting an emoji for the different things. Like whenever we put our notes in it, I put a little emoji next to it.
You love the emojis, don't you?
I absolutely live for it. Or putting my own icon. You saw like when we got our Five Guys logo done by my wonderful girlfriend, I put it in our Five Guys page. If somebody was to jump on and be like, right, say for example, we're going to have a guest, I wouldn't even think about like emailing them or sending them a text saying, God, can you write a quick note about this? Or, let's discuss things we want to talk about. I'd be like, here's your Notion page. jump in. This is what we're going to talk about. This is what I've written notes about. This is the outline.
Yeah.
I would just share that page with them and say, and if somebody was to come on board as like a regular guest for Five Guys or whatever, I would just add them as an admin to Five Guys and be like, you are now a part of this. This is how we operate. And, we've got our own system that works for us, for Five Guys. You've got your own system that works for you for work. I actually separate my work and personal Notions into completely different accounts.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So I have a drop down in the top because, I always talk about disconnecting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that for me was a huge way of disconnecting. It's arguably it's a bit annoying when I'm like, well, I'm at work and I need to look at something personal, but I make that conscious decision to be like, hit the drop down, go to personal and find that document.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the bottom line is I shouldn't look at personal stuff in work time. So I just have a work Notion that's all of my notes, and I back that one up regularly as well because the backup function's wicked. I think it's good as well for sharing information, and that's how I've been using it recently. I think I mentioned this on another episode where somebody was asking about how we executed a certain process, and I was like, I've actually got a guide on that. I think it was for a CLI guide that I'd written with David.
Yeah.
And we put all of the stuff, he was going through it, I was taking screenshots and taking the code grabs, and I was putting it into Notion. And when somebody said, can I have a look at it? I was just like, yep, here's the web link.
Here it is, yeah.
And they could browse it like a web page. So, and I think people are, maybe they're not. Maybe if anyone from work listens to it, they think, what a nerdy product. But I thought it looked really cool to share with them, like a web page where they can click through and be like, that's the CLI command. And, like a quick reference guide, which isn't on, you could save it locally. You could export it as HTML. You could export as a PDF, whatever you want to do. Export all of the sub pages as well. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, no, I think there's lots of things that for a work environment, actually, it's perfect for. And, the whole wiki thing is where a lot of organizations have kind of, jumped in with both feet. For me, it's having everything connected. Essentially what I've done is I've built a CRM in Notion, but with the benefit of it being my CRM in the way that I work. And so, my customer and opportunity project records are connected to my action items, and those records have pre-filtered, I think they call them inline databases, which are essentially pre-filtered views of the master actions database, the master products database, but they're pre-filtered based on the record that it's looking at. So you can kind of self-reference the record, and basically when I have a new customer or a new opportunity, I click one button, literally one button, to apply the template that I've created, and literally everything is set up. Everything is pre-filtered, and it's like a dashboard for that opportunity or a dashboard for that customer. And it allows me to see every touch point that's happened with that client or with that opportunity on one record card. And then from there, I can jump into any of the detail that I need to. I'll say this very proudly, right? I have had the best year of my career from June 2020 to now, right? That can't be a coincidence with, having used Notion for that long and for having a system that is exactly what I thought I needed there in front of me at my fingertips. And so, as I say, I want to not go into loads and loads of detail on Notion and why it's amazing. We could probably talk for another hour on that.
For sure.
It's something that, for me and the way that I work, and equally for you and the way that you work, it's tapped into something that actually has kind of like pushed us to that next level, interestingly. I mean, look, it's not perfect, right? It does require a lot of hand cranking to keep up to date, especially with my calendar, because, you can't have everybody using Notion. There's still meeting invites on meeting invites in Outlook and all of that sort of stuff. And Notion's biggest drawback is that it's currently a silo. It's not connected to anything else at the moment, and that means that...
Do you know what, though? I'm sorry to interject, but I like that. Maybe I'm playing devil's advocate, but I like it because I'm like, this is my Notion, this is my wiki, this is my page. And then I've got other functions that I use for work. So I have control of what's going in. I understand, like, not duplicating, I kind of thought about it, like, would I like to just have my Todoist embedded in it?
Yeah.
It might be cool, but would I use it more than just having that app open?
Yeah.
For me, sometimes it's nice to have that kind of separation between your different apps. I know we were talking about, I mentioned a single pane of glass, and it would be great. Like, maybe you could have like one screen that has all of your apps down the side, but it's like, do I care that much? Like I like the siloing of Notion.
Yeah, it's a hard disagree from me.
Yeah.
We are different in some ways sometimes. Not very often, but we do have different opinions. For me, from having used it for the last 9 months, there is one thing that is slightly painful, and that is adding scheduled meetings to my action items. So, I think I agree with you in a lot of ways. Being intentional with the information that you want to pull into Notion or your second brain, essentially, totally agree. I can't argue with that. You are absolutely right. However, being intentional with the information that you want to put in it is different to having to transpose the information manually every time you put in something. So I have a process as part of my weekly review where I look at the next 2 weeks worth of calendar appointments, and then I have to sit there and add them in. Wouldn't it be great if I could just sync those with my Outlook calendar, and that I've already made the decision that I'm going to do that thing on that day at that time because it's in my calendar, right? And so if I could just go boop and it just syncs it, that would be amazing. And so it's finding a balance between everything just being thrown at it, and you don't want to have everything automatically populating Notion, because I agree, you want to be intentional with what you have in your second brain. You want to almost have a barrier of entry. You just don't want everything in there.
Exactly.
You want it to qualify to be deserving of being in that system. But then on the flip side, you've already made decisions elsewhere in other apps where it's like, well, I'm going to do that call at 10 o'clock on Monday. I just want that to push over, and it'll just make my life a lot easier. So that's the main kind of drawback for me. The other main drawback is its reliability, especially recently. It's become quite slow in places as my system has grown, and it's had some outages and some challenges like that. And the company have grown massively, so I imagine they're just struggling with those growing pains. But yeah, it does sort of take the sheen off a little bit. But it's not perfect.
It's also working out, and like for someone that's new to Notion, I guess, it's also working out what's worth doubling up.
Yeah.
Because I found that, I have a work-based Kanban where I'll look at the tasks in my ticketing system, which it sounds bonkers now that I'm kind of explaining it out loud, because I have a ticketing system that does a lot of it for me.
Right.
But sometimes I want to work from Notion and be like, right, Notion's on one screen. It's got all of my notes. If somebody wants me to add something, I'll add it to my Notion. But I would, at the beginning of a week, sometimes just put all of my open tickets that I need to do actions wise.
Yeah.
I know, and this is the thing, this is where it becomes a bit like, I enjoy the silo because I can be like, I'm going to work from Notion today. And then sometimes I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to do it. Because sometimes you just don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to work from a Kanban, because then I can send my boss at the end of a week, here's all of the tasks that I've archived. This week I've done X amount of stuff, instead of, because sometimes I'm doing non-work based efforts, but I still want to categorize that. I'm not going to raise a ticket in our ticketing system, which is primarily for incidents and requests and stuff like that, to be like, this is my own incident or my own request that I'm doing. So it's nice to track that sort of stuff, but then I could also do that in Todoist. So it's working out what's worth doubling up. But for me, it's like being able to report back, because there's a requirement for me to kind of justify some of my time on what I've been doing. And I guess that's where Toggle would come in if I'd given it the time of day. But it's so few and far between that I wouldn't need to. But at the end of the week, I can just kind of export Notion and go, right, here's all the tasks I've done. These are the ones that are relevant to you, instead of having to type up an email. And it just looks cooler to be like, here's my Kanban board. This is where I'm at. So they can see that, tasks not started, tasks in progress, tasks completed, and tasks pending someone, especially for internal tasks. Not necessarily for client-facing stuff, but I do it for internal tasks. So I use a Kanban board, and I love it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think you're right. It's having everything in one place, but making the call on what qualifies for that place, if you see what I mean. Yeah. No.
Yeah, well, that's what you were saying about being intentional about the data you put into it, which is where I would, I'm not opposed to integration, but that's where I'd be a bit skeptical about what I wanted to integrate. Your example is a perfect example of it. I wouldn't mind having my calendar appointments in there and just having a Notion notification instead of it. Because then my email would be used for all my automated tasks, because where I've done automation, I CC'd myself into all of the emails because I like to be involved. I'm like, I've automated that, and it's going to schedule a task, it's going to create a document, it's going to put it here and send it to that person. But I'm like, well, I just want to be sure it goes I want to be sure. Like, so I'm CC'd into all of it. It'd be nice to just have, like that in my, one folder, and then have actually my important calendar appointments. Maybe you could pick like calendar appointments from certain people and be like, that's going in Notion, or calendar appointments between a certain time, because I know like Outlook are keen on saying you should book out some time to take a break. And it's like, yes, I should.
Yeah.
You don't want that in your Notion.
No,
you don't. For being productive, you don't want to be like, oh, I'm taking a break there. So it'd be nice to just populate some of that information and just look at that in the morning and go, this is what I'm doing today.
I agree. Yeah, it's all, trying to iron out those details. I'm sure when the API eventually comes, then we'll have a bit more of a better idea of what might be possible there. But for now, just got to do it the hard way. Thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our show. And if you really, really liked it, please consider giving us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out, it helps us grow our audience. So, only if you loved it, but if you did, then that'd be really good. If you'd like to hear more from Dan or myself, please follow us on Twitter @ThriveGuysPod. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Say goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye.